Okay,
All right, well, the
let's
mic's
take
working.
turns just talking, just
Okay.
to make sure. Okay, so we're talking to each other.
Talking, facing profile,
Now talking, looking at the camera.
which is definitely still crooked, but whatever. You can fix that. The first thing I need to say is I literally have not hit record a single time we've started. Not even once.
Take 25.
Said I'm all about it. Yeah, I'm all about it. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, I'm all about it. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hello, and welcome to Two Women Yelling About Knitting, a show that's not about what we're buying or what we're making, but instead asks questions like, if knitting allows you to design garments for bodies of any shape, why are the most popular patterns designed by and for thin women? This is a space where we look up from our works in progress and acquisitions and talk about what we see in the wider world of knitting, its political, social, and historical context. But don't worry, it'll be fun. I'm Angeli, and I'm a knitter in Denver, Colorado.
And I'm Allison, and I'm a knitter living outside of Washington, D.C. We're friends who share a love of knitting, as well as an interest in a lot of sticky topics that relate to knitting. Things like traditional gender roles, consumerism, body liberation, and more. We're recording a 6-season episode with a new episode and a new topic every 2 weeks. If you want to join us on this journey, hit the subscribe button to follow along.
And we're in person.
Yay! Angeli
Yay.
had to come for work to DC, so it's perfect.
Yes.
I canceled everything I had to do today.
We've just spent 2 hours trying to figure out how to record a podcast together in person.
And 2 hours before that at the Smithsonian American Art Museum's State Fair exhibit, which was what I thought you were going to say, but also then 2 hours after that, quick break for lunch, and then 2 hours trying to figure out how to record in person. All
And
of
here we
the
are.
bloopers we will include at some point, but here we are.
Yeah.
We've talked about Las Culturistas many times on this podcast. They were talking about something the other day, and they talked about how the show started as basically an excuse to have a play date once a week.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what this is too. It's like,
I still feel like it is, even though we're not in person usually, but this is much better.
yeah. Well, I mean, like, right. Anytime it's just like an excuse
Yeah.
to talk to you once a week. And now we get to like actually do
I
it in
know.
person.
And
so
we haven't been together in person since
2019.
2019.
Well,
Well,
because
that's
we
when
came
you
to New
visited.
Orleans.
Yeah,
So
okay.
you visited Pittsburgh in early 2018 because we
Yeah.
moved in 2017, and we were just looking at pictures because you saw my kids, and there was like a picture of you holding the now 9-year-old when
I
she was like
know.
tiny little 2-year-old. And maybe we'll like flash that.
Yeah. Just real quick.
Just, yeah, so you guys can see. But then we did come to New Orleans, and I think we just saw you for like an afternoon. We were only there for
it
like a
wasn't very
weekend.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2019, and that was it.
So this is fun.
Monumental.
Yes. All right.
So what are we talking about today?
So today we are talking about knitting and body liberation. So the opening question for you, Allison, for both of us, is what is one way that you adapt your knitting to fit the unique aspects of your body?
Yeah, this is a great question to start with because I think as we get into this topic of body liberation today, the whole idea of like modifying patterns comes up and is very important. And so I was thinking very specifically, I have knit a lot of garments and like I'm still trying to figure things out. Like, do I like how drop shoulder armpit depth feels on me? Like, how do raglans work? Like, you know, what kind of ease do I particularly like? Which are all things to think about all the time. But like the easiest way to answer this question is with socks because I have very narrow feet. And so that's what's fun about being a knitter is it's like I will basically take off like a 4 or 5 inches of any circumference of sock, and it like fits so nice and like tight, which is what I want. Whereas like if I just go with the pattern, usually it's going to be a little too loose. So that's me. How about you?
So mine is also socks.
Oh.
So I have what the Japanese call daikon ashi, which means a daikon leg. So if you know what a
Like a
daikon
radish?
looks
Okay.
like,
Sort
it's
of?
like that's like a term that they, and I'm not Japanese, but I lived in Japan for a while. So
Yeah.
that's like a term that they use to describe someone that has like a thicker calf. So
Oh, like
and those-
because the radish starts and then it like
Yes.
tapers.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. But I have my dad's legs, which are definitely daikon ashi. So I've discovered that having sort of a larger size for the ankle part of the sock and then a smaller size for the foot part of the sock really works well for me. So
So do you have a different? So your stitch count is different. Like often
Yes.
the stitch count will like
Yes.
even back out
right.
after the heel.
I
but
do a
you-
smaller stitch count around the foot
reduce
than
more.
I did around the ankle. And it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
They fit better.
That is a great opening question to start with. As I said, we're definitely talking about modifications later, but that's not really the focus of this episode. The focus of this episode is, what would you say, Angela?
I'd say it's that knitting has the potential to create something that fits any sort of body, no matter what that body's traits are. Yet, if you look at the most popular knitting patterns and knitting designers, most often it's thin women designing for their own bodies in sweaters that are usually pictured also on thin women. So the question, thin women, and not just thin, but thin, cis, able-bodied women. So the question is an exploration of why is that? Like where is that gap and what are we missing in between?
Like it's like that's
Right.
part of why making your own clothes is a great thing, because you can make it exactly for your body. Yeah.
And in that way kind of empower all bodies to be clothed in the way that you want to be clothed. And so I think my question is knitting doing body inclusivity right?
Which then leads very quickly into the next question, which is, what is body inclusivity?
This episode is going to be a little different, as is the next one, where each of us is going to take a turn sort of diving deep into a topic that is near and dear to us. And this topic of, body inclusivity and body liberation is very near and dear to my heart, because I am a weight inclusive dietitian and have been on my own sort of learning journey, especially as someone in a thin body, just learning about experiences of other people in the world who live in different types of bodies. And I think as a dietitian, you get very steeped in that fat phobic world of nutrition a lot of the times. And so I'm just very inspired to make knitting a more inclusive space. When I came back to it a couple years ago, I was super excited to see all the different sorts of designs that I guess were just sort of served to me by the algorithm initially, that seemed so colorful and different types of people, like people in different types of clothing that just seemed really exuberant and full of life, and people with all kinds of bodies. And that I think was not actually the reality of most of the knitting world once I started getting deeper into it. And I just started to feel that the promise of knitting, that it could be this way of creating joy and creating art for all different types of bodies, is not actually played out very commonly in the knitting community.
Now, you also just brought up body positivity. So this is near and dear to your heart. It's certainly something that I know about, but don't know about in the like deep way that you know about it in multiple fields and on multiple levels. But I certainly have seen, and we'll talk about them later, but certain designers like Creya Bea talking about, especially size inclusivity, meaning like a certain range of sizes, like making sure that a pattern works for bodies, in a wide range of sizes. But I don't know about it the way that you know about it. So I am curious, what is the difference between body liberation and body positivity?
Yeah, good question. Body positivity at its root is about loving your body no matter what it is. And so that came from fat acceptance movement of the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
And
That goes that far back.
Yeah. And so that was influenced by the civil rights movement. A lot of sort of movements around the rights of marginalized groups were happening during that time, because people were really inspired to kind of speak up for their own human rights. So the fat acceptance movement started that. But at this point in time, I mean, when I think about body positivity, it's very social media friendly. Like, it's all about the individual, like people looking inward. I'm really love myself for who I am. It also just has the word positive in it, which kind of gives toxic positivity of just always being positive about something. And we might not feel positive about our bodies at all times. And that doesn't mean that our bodies are somehow invalidated. Also, the body positivity movement really came to morph and be more about people in smaller bodies, talking about feeling happy about their bodies, and just it was centered around thinner white women, moving from its roots in the fat acceptance movement, which was by and for fat people. And I'll take a moment here just to talk about the term fat, because that might be triggering for some people. But I'll say, as a dietitian who's like trained in issues of weight and like quantifying weights, that for many people, fat is actually a more neutral term than to use a term like overweight, which in its very essence is saying that you are over something, you're over an ideal weight. Or obese, which is based on BMI, body mass index, which I won't get into the whole history of BMI, but was created by a white man, was never meant to be applied actually to like populations of people to sort of quantify their bodies. But now that's how it's used, and it is inaccurate for many racial and ethnic groups. So not to say obese is to use a definition that is essentially meaningless, like in that it just has this prescribed meaning on it. It's not like, oh, a doctor told me, so it must be true. So that's why I prefer to use that word. I don't always use it because I don't always know someone else's comfort with that word, especially speaking as someone with thin privilege. It might not be welcomed, but in this podcast, that's the word I'll be using because I think that feels the least judgmental to me.
Okay. And so so fascinating context on body positivity, which I had no idea was that old.
Yeah.
And so then what is liberation?
Body positivity is all focused on the individual, at least in its how it's defined now, like very focused on the individual, about your own feelings about your body, changing those feelings and your own particular individual actions. And body liberation is about dismantling the systems of oppression that basically privilege white, thin, cis, able-bodied bodies over others. So that is very intersectional. It's systemic. So it's not about, just one individual person, but about working together to get rid of these entire systems of oppression. And it is collective. So everyone has to be a part of it because it affects us all in some way or another. So body liberation is also in targeting systems. It's not about, oh, there was one Dove body wash ad that like featured larger bodied people. It's about getting rid of the entire system that oppresses people based on what their body looks like.
Okay. I'm learning so much. This is fascinating. Okay. So then we talked about this movement towards positivity, liberation. What are the roots of the system? So in the first place, like where does that come from?
In the West, a scholar named Sabrina Strings has written a book called Fearing the Black Body. I don't know. Have you ever heard of that book? So in that book, she talks about how a lot of like fat phobia in the United States and in other countries is rooted in the slave trade. And as Black people in the United States were freed from slavery and became integrated into white society, Blackness and sort of the bodily characteristics of Blackness became associated with being uncivilized, and white women were told to control their eating and to keep their bodies small, whereas before that, having a larger body was okay. But as racism and wanting to distance white people from Blackness at all costs, the characteristics of Black bodies became associated with something bad. And so she proposes that that's kind of the root of fat phobia in our culture. And definitely, like, if you are a Black woman with a larger body, you experience, this is the intersectional thing where you experience discrimination more heavily than a white person in a larger body.
And race, gender,
yes.
Age. I mean, right. That is the definition of intersectionality is like how all of those pieces overlap in different ways. Have you written about this elsewhere?
Thanks for asking, Allison. So if you're interested in that topic, obviously this isn't a podcast about nutrition or, the cultural racist roots of nutrition. But if you're interested, I'll link in the show notes to an article that I wrote for Well and Good that is about the roots in eugenics of nutrition advice that people started giving during the progressive era.
So we've set up body liberation, body positivity. And now, of course, this is two women yelling about knitting.
Yeah.
So how does knitting fit into this? Or how does this fit into knitting?
Yeah. So why I'm interested in this topic is just that first reintroduction to knitting that I had, which was 2021, 2022. And so there were some knitters who were coming forward and being very vocal about being size inclusive, having models who maybe were gender non-binary or had larger bodies. And I was really excited about that potential. It's just the potential that designers, like knitters, have the ability to knit garments to fit their body, no matter what their body looks like. And also garments that, like, how for language justice, they say, like, speak the language of your heart. Like, knitters can, like, wear the clothes of their heart. And designers have the opportunity to design that. And yet, there's a whole lot of beige, drop shoulder, oversized sweaters on thin women that are taking over our feeds. So I just am curious about, like, have knitters tried to seize this opportunity for body liberation? And to be honest, in looking at the historical documentation that exists, I haven't seen a lot of it. Like, I kind of wish I could go back to the 70s. I feel like in the 70s, probably knitters were doing really body liberated things, but at the moment it's few and far between. So I was interested in talking a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we need to get some back issues of, like, I don't know, Vogue knitting or see.
Yeah. But also I feel like, but that was the thing that, because back then there was the gatekeeper of the magazines. And so the magazines, actually, if you look back, those are not size inclusive at all. Right. It's horrible. So what was so fascinating about coming back to knitting in the 2020s was that gatekeeping isn't there, and we can do anything, and anyone can design for anyone.
A pattern that self-publish, put it on the internet. Yeah.
Is a petite knit pattern that different from a Vogue knitting pattern? It's pretty
well, but I mean, and we'll get to this, but like some of those patterns, and I think she is one of the designers who's been doing this, like retroactively going back, and like while they may not have some of them may not have been published as size inclusive, have been like retroactively going back and grading to add different sizes, which then brings us to the term size inclusive, which I think is a good way to think about how these questions relate to knitting. So a knitwear designer, Susanna Winter, she had a blog post. It's interesting. There are a lot of blog posts about this topic around 2020, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But talking about what does it mean to be size inclusive? So size inclusive, going with body liberation in that the system of knitting patterns, of knitting design is being changed to include more sizes to allow for people of different bodies to participate in this activity. So she had an interesting way that I think was kind of like crowdsourced from Ravelry discussions about what it meant to be size inclusive. It's not like a technical term, but it's about like size range, number of sizes, the sizing increments, like how much difference there is between each size, and also the ease of the garment. Ease being specifically like how much extra room you're meant to wear something with, because she points this out. It's like if you have a 72-inch circumference garment, that seems to fall into size inclusivity. But if it's meant to be worn with 20 inches of positive ease, that means technically it's fitting a 52-inch body, which is not part of the generally accepted range of size inclusivity. So as she defines it, usually to be size inclusive, a pattern should go up to 60 inches at least in circumference, which is the equivalent of like a 5X without ease. So something else that we were talking about as we were prepping for this episode is like, the way we're talking about size inclusive today, and this is true with most of our episodes because both of us do this, we're like, wait, we could talk about this, we could talk about this, we could talk about it this way. It's like size inclusivity can also be about, like, it can be about the range of sizes, not just going up, but is it also going down? Or is it also about the type of body that's being designed for, not just in terms of size, but in terms of ability? As you said, bodies in wheelchairs, for example, like how a sweater fits a body that is always in a seated position is going to be different from a body that is standing, or if there is a missing limb or any sort of thing like that. How do we have patterns that address those
sensory
questions?
friendly,
sensory friendly, yeah,
adaptive.
But because we don't want to make episodes 3 hours long, we are kind of looking at this specific question in size inclusivity, which is more about sizing up, because that also has been the end of the size range that has been historically ignored. So again, acknowledging that there are all these other ways to think about body liberation and size inclusivity from different angles, but today it's really more thinking about getting larger sizes available.
So Allison, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Are there any controversies around size inclusivity that you've experienced or heard about in the knitting world?
Definitely. So we did our best to research these and not make it all hearsay, but then some of it feels a little bit hearsay. We just had a bit of a technical moment. And in that moment, did a little bit of more research because I was like, I keep hearing these things, but are they true or not? But regardless of the details, absolutely. I mean, you can just see for yourself going on Ravelry and searching for patterns with certain sizing or not. Like, you're going to get plenty of options or plenty of patterns that don't have larger sizes. But I will say that, in researching this episode and looking up what people had to say about size inclusivity, a lot of the material came in the year 2020. And so we were also talking about that, where it's like, well, what happened in 2020 that this is such a topic of conversation? And you had pointed out that it was COVID, and that was this ton of people took up knitting or came back to knitting, and many of them were younger knitters for the first time. And, you and I both as elder millennials.
I'm a Zennial, actually.
Oh, because you're 1980?
1979.
1979.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh,
I'm
special.
I'm happy for you.
Oregon Trail generation.
Yeah, I'm 1982, which is real. I can't claim anything other than millennial, but our generation, certainly. This is a little plug for the book I'm reading now, which is Girl on Girl, which is a lot about the late 90s, 2000s culture that made us think about ourselves the way we think about ourselves.
Not good.
That the younger people who were coming to knitting in the year 2020 had
expectations
and different ways of viewing themselves and the systems that bodies exist in our world. And so we're like, hey, where are the patterns with some larger sizes that were not there?
I'm also thinking about what we talked about earlier with the history of the body positivity movement, that came from the civil rights movement. And obviously 2020 was a year of Black Lives Matter, the murder of George Floyd, and a lot more people just thinking about how marginalized populations are accepted by the world or not, and fighting for rights. So it's kind of an interesting potential echo of history.
I thought the same thing because, again, this was a little bit of an educational episode for me, and you talking about the history of fat phobia and related to the history of our country's racial dynamic, and being like, oh, that's so interesting that 2020 would be the year when these questions would start, or when there would be a push for more of this. Yeah, so there are definitely some designers out there who are making size inclusivity a big part of how they design, how they talk about their own designs, and also just the design world. Jack Cieslak, Jessie Mae Martinson, James Watts, Rebecca Clow are the ones who came up, first and foremost when we were talking about it. In fact, Rebecca Clow, also the Crea Bea, seen her talk multiple times on her podcast about I think she actually got into designing because she was like, there aren't sizes that I'm looking for. Why don't patterns have these sizes? I'm going to make some patterns with these sizes. So there certainly are designers out there who are making it part of what they do and how they talk about it.
And I feel like some designers who don't, or maybe don't do as wide a size range as others, sometimes say that the grading is too difficult, it takes too much work. I know you've had some training in tech editing, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about grading for larger sizes.
Yeah, so I did do a hot second of tech editing training, which did not actually include grade. Like grading is like its own beast, but we talked about it kind of as an idea. And the idea of grading is it exists in all clothing, right? It's like what makes something a size extra small, what makes something a size 3XL. It's like you grade the basic idea of what you're making and you grade it for different sizes. So grading is like, how do I make something bigger or smaller, essentially? But it's not that easy. And that is I don't want to say complaint, but that is something that designers point to as being a difficult piece of being size inclusive, right? Grading is not like straight up fifth grade ratio math. It's not like, okay, well, this size is this circumference for the bust and this arm length. And then as I go up, everything just increases by a factor of 2, right? That's not how grading works. It's more nuanced than that, right? Like just because a bust size gets bigger doesn't mean the neck gets bigger. Like you had said, you were looking into this, and it's like that. If you're just kind of going without any sort of training, everything's just going to get oversized, which is not how bodies work. Same thing we were thinking about with like a sleeve, right? The circumference of the sleeve might change, but that doesn't mean that the sleeve also gets longer. It's not pure ratio math. So yeah, it is.
So difficult, but not impossible.
It is a different thing that needs to be done. And again, if you go into online spaces of people talking about the challenges of size inclusivity, it's not that it's just like, this is an easy thing and everyone should do it. And it's like, you snap your fingers and it's there. It's more work. It's more money, right? A lot of designers don't do their own grading. They pay somebody to do the grading for them. And so that's more money out of their pocket up front. Like, then maybe the pattern also costs more. So there are costs and time and effort associated with it. But the argument is that at the end of the day, that is an investment that will be worth it in the end.
Yeah.
So just to kind of give the perspective of like what it takes to be size inclusive, it's not like it does take a degree of effort, but the point of body liberation and size inclusivity is that effort is worthwhile and, will be worth it for the designer in the end.
So what makes a design size inclusive? Like what is that range that defines something as inclusive?
Right. So again, in terms of what we're talking about today, it's mostly about how far in the large direction a size range goes. So the accepted definition, or kind of like the standard definition, if not technical, is 60-inch circumference, which is a 5X. Now, what's interesting is I say, wait, what makes 60-inch circumference 5X? Anyone who has shopped for any sort of ready-to-wear clothing in the last 10 years will know that like size actually kind of doesn't mean anything, right? Yeah. Like what size you can wear 2 different brands and be like 8 sizes different. I mean, it means nothing. But technically, there are like standardized measurements for sizes that come from an organization, not the Carolina Christian Youth Conference. Not that was it.
The Campus Center for Young Children, the Chesapeake Catalina Yacht Club, the Cardiff Central Youth Club.
We're going to put it in here later. I'm going to Google it. It's gonna...
Craft Yarn Council.
Is that it?
I think so. Try that.
Craft Yarn Council. Standard sizes. You're right. I was adding an extra C. Look at you. Craft Yarn Council. CYC, not CCYC. That gets you a whole bunch of other stuff. But there are standardized body measurements, right? Which is like a body that is a size large is usually these dimensions. A body that is a size 3XL is usually these dimensions. And XL or, XS, extra small, XL, etc.
And there's actually just a interesting side quest around, I've seen some discussion about what you name sizes, basically, versus, instead of saying XL,
such a good point,
having just size
numeric
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
That's
6.
a really interesting...
Because a lot of people feel judged,
right,
based on, you're a 5XL.
Right. Versus, and I feel like now that I think about that too, the designers that Andrea Gaughan is another designer who does a lot of size inclusivity, thinking about those patterns. it is very much the numeric instead of more of like a name for it. Yes, that's a great point. So what makes a pattern size inclusive? So as I said, this up to at least a 60-inch circumference without ease is the key, because 60-inch circumference with 10 inches of positive ease is actually for a 50-inch body. That's one piece of it. Another piece of it is the number of sizes, right? So you could have, and that kind of goes along with this idea of size, the increments between sizes. So you could have a pattern that goes from 32 inches to 62 inches, but has like 10, but it's only 32, 42, only 4 sizes because it's like 10 full inches up for each size. That is not really also considered size inclusive. That gives you the upper range, but it's not giving you kind of like the in-between signposts to find what really matches closer to your body. That's kind of like these huge jumps that are not as useful for knitters because you're not going to find the thing that really fits your own body.
And then there's things like suggested bust darts, which I feel like people have been talking about more, at least in the knitting content that I've been following.
Yeah.
What are those and what do they do?
Yeah, so bust darts, which I have not used because I don't need them, right? So it's like, this is what's so nice about modifications is like you take them or you don't. And I do think that designers are now doing this. So we'll get to that too. So I guess this is kind of part of size inclusivity. So that's these size ranges, but also suggested modifications. So bust darts are a way of adapting a pattern to fit a larger bust. So if you have a larger bust circumference, but perhaps like the shoulder measurements and the waist measurement of a certain size work for you, but the bust is too small, you can add these bust darts that give you a little bit more room in that part of your body. And so that is something that designers have been doing where it's like, if you want to use bust darts, do this. If you don't want to use bust darts, do this. Even the basic idea of modifying length, right? But like sometimes designers will say that too, rather than just 30 rounds or whatever it is. It's like, knit to get 3 inches of length or your desire, whatever you're going after. Giving those signposts to knitters to know here's a place where I could do something different that works for my body.
Yeah. And what's so great nowadays is then you can just link to a YouTube tutorial about how to do that thing.
Yeah. Thank goodness. So I will say there has been this like controversy in terms of like, we just pointed out people who are actively trying to be size inclusive and making that conversation about size inclusivity. And then there's still plenty of designers who are not doing that. And then interestingly, there are designers who are retroactively going back and grading their patterns. So Petite Knit is one of those people. When she started with her patterns, they were a much narrower range. And now like she's gone back and added sizes to a lot of her patterns. I think in response to this desire for more sizes.
Also, good business decision.
Right.
Why not have more sizes to accommodate more different types of bodies?
Yeah. We actually talked about, so another thing that people say, so the grading being something that maybe makes designers more hesitant to be size inclusive is one thing. Another thing that designers talk about is test knitters, which is just interesting. So even these size designers who are more interested in size inclusivity, again, Crea Bea has talked about like, I got a gazillion entries for sizes 2 through 4, and then size 8, I still am, 8 and 9, I still have nobody or like one person who submitted to test knit. So designers do have a harder time filling the upper end of their test range. And sometimes what that can be about too is it just takes longer to knit.
Yeah, and it's more expensive.
Right. More yarn, more time to knit a bigger garment. And I will say that she has also, Crea Bea has talked about this too, where she's like, I give a test window thinking about that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the tester window is to accommodate the thing that will take the longest.
Right. And I don't know if a lot of designers do that.
Right.
I've seen a lot of very short window tests being advertised.
Yeah. Really quick turnaround. And even sometimes it gets to the point where like, a designer will have a disclaimer on the pattern being like, well, this size was never tested. So I think the grading's right. Because that's the thing too. Grading is still abstract. That's why we have test knitters, because grading is cool. It's math. It should work. But you don't necessarily know until somebody tries it. And so if nobody tries it, you could be getting the pattern thinking I'm going to make this size and not realize that it actually doesn't work out.
Yeah, so sometimes they'll offer the pattern for free if you
Mm-hmm.
are getting one of the larger sizes. And I don't know if you have to give feedback in exchange, but that seems more fair than selling a pattern that has not actually been tested for your size.
And I think, again, it's not that this means you shouldn't be size inclusive, right? It means that you might need to work harder to find test knitters. And it's like a setback or a thing to have to think about and overcome and plan for, but not impossible.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of a lot of the conversations, again, around finding like a racially diverse workforce, let's say, if you're working in HR, where a lot of the times people are like, but there's no qualified applicants, you know? And is that true? Or are you just not looking in the right places? Like, I think it's on you. It's not on the people who are applying. So I think similarly, if your audience doesn't include people in larger size bodies, then maybe you need to rethink how you are presenting your work to the world and what spaces you are advertising your work in.
Right. And you said that too, in terms of how patterns look like, right? Like you go on Ravelry and you look through photos, like what kind of bodies are you seeing?
Right.
Are you seeing the pattern on? And I do, again, this size inclusivity too is not just about offering those sizes, but then giving those as options. So I do think people who make that a point of their design practice are also really good at having testers who share photos of all different sizes, all different bodies. The quickest of break-ins to say that despite having it in our notes, we forgot to mention the Size Inclusive Collective, which is an incredible resource in this conversation about knitting patterns, size inclusivity, body liberation, body positivity. We will link to it in the show notes. Again, we talked about this, but also gender, right? We talked about this too. There's been this, obviously, cis women are what you're going to find most of on Ravelry, but how something fits a trans body or how something fits a male body, right? A supposedly unisex pattern, is that going to work if you knit it for a man?
Yeah.
That's always a question. So this comes back a little bit to our first question, which was like, how do you modify? What do you do for modifications? Because size inclusivity at the end of the day is like, in my mind, to some degree, is designer guided modification, right? Anybody can modify. I graded a pattern recently. So there was an adult pattern that my daughter really liked and it didn't have child sizes. And so I graded it. Okay. And that was a great experience where I was like,
It looks good to me.
it looked good. It's also going to fit her. It was going to fit her for like 3 months. Like it's not, she's going to grow out of it really fast because I didn't make it quite big enough, but it was really hard. So the more experience you have as a knitter, or the more resources you go to, the more you can decide what those modifications are for yourself. Because even if a pattern offers 12 sizes, that it's still your body. I mean, that's the thing about being humans. That's great. It's like everybody is different, and how you like something to fit is going to be different, right? Like you even could have the same dimensions as somebody else, but you're going for this kind of fit and they're going for this kind of fit. So there are a couple resources that we just wanted to share in terms of good places to look if you're interested in really understanding modification. Specifically, Isolde has a book called Little Red in the City, which
And we'll link to all these.
yeah, which may or may not be in print anymore.
I think I saw the ebook.
Oh, well, there you go. That's a great resource. Again, like we're not the first people to talk about these books. They're talked about everywhere.
I've read Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater book, and that has some hints for modifications, but then she has a whole book called Knit to Flatter that's all about figuring out what will flatter you, what you like, and how to knit in a way that fits those dimensions or characteristics.
Yeah. And because at the end of the day, the more skill you have as a knitter, the more you experiment with making modifications, the easier that becomes for you. But I can see how that would be very hard for somebody without that experience, right? And that's why having the designer hold your hand a little bit and be like, hey, like you want something that's closer to this size, like let me give that to you, or let me tell you how to do bust darts, or let me tell you how to make a broader shoulder, or whatever it is, right? Like that is going to help the knitter a lot, get to a place where they are comfortable in terms of learning how to do their own modifications, which ultimately is going to give you the best fit for your specific body. But so I think that that's kind of the benefit of size inclusivity, is it includes more, not just, it includes more bodies, and it includes more like levels of knitting, right? Like you're not going to scare someone off who's like, well, this isn't going to fit my body, so I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
They're going to feel like they're going to get something they like more out of it. And then knit more and get to the point where maybe they are able to take a pattern that doesn't have what they're looking for, but then make it their own.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Westerman, who wrote a great blog post about size inclusivity, she's a designer. We will link to that post in the notes. Wrote on her blog, learning how to modify a garment is a really empowering thing. It will teach you so much about your own body, and you will definitely realize that you are not an alien blob. High street fashion teaches us all from a young age that our bodies are wrong in a myriad of ways. Making your own well-fitting clothes is you taking back that power.
Yeah.
Bringing us full circle to body positivity and body liberation, and why making a sweater that fits you, that you like, is doing that.
And we're curious what you think about this topic. If you are a knitter living in a larger body or in a body that's somehow different from the quote unquote norm, how do you modify your patterns? Are there any designers that you love and would recommend to other people? Anybody that's doing it in a way that you really admire? What are your thoughts on this topic? How do you knit to fit the body that you live in, and also maybe to help dismantle some of these oppressive systems that make us all feel bad about our bodies?
Right. And I think anybody who has ever done a modification on a pattern, right? It is that maybe less a body liberation thing and maybe more of like that body positivity and like, here's what my individual body needs, but that still is a good thing. And curious to know, like, how did you discover what that modification was? Or like, how do you do that on a regular basis in your patterns? Is there something that you follow for your own comfort or what you are going for in a look that you can apply to different patterns, and how you figured that out? We'd love to hear about it.
And now we are on to two women happy about knitting.
Yes. Angeli, what's made you happy recently in your knitting life?
What's made me happy is I have discovered that I have two younger sisters, and my middle sister, whenever I show up in a hand knit garment, she's like, "Oh, you knit that? How much does it cost to knit something like that?" Not that she wants to knit it, she just wants to know how much the yarn cost me. Clearly fishing for
how much would I have to pay you?
Yes. So obviously, as we all know, you don't necessarily want to dive into making a garment for somebody else if you don't know if they're going to be knit worthy or not. And so my happy about knitting is I made a hat for my sister, which I actually talked about in a previous episode, knitting with the Sunday, that was very boring, but the resulting hat was very soft and wonderful. And I just gave it to her recently and just really felt her appreciation of it. And I just knew, like, she and I had picked out that yarn color together, and I just knew that she was really going to love and appreciate that hat. So I was like, all right, yeah, like I'll make you a garment. Mm-hmm. And so I said, if you want me to make you a sweater and you buy the yarn, I'll totally knit it for you. And she said, actually, I want a vest. And I was like, yes, I understand. I have also dipped my toe in the vest knitting world. So I'm making her the Scylla, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Scylla vest by Petite Knit, which uses up pearls to make kind of a zigzag pattern.
Okay.
And it recommends Sandnes Garden Peer Gynt. So she wanted to go with that yarn, and she chose the white tweed. So I'll put some B-roll of the yarn and then maybe the swatch that I knit for it.
Nice. I'm so glad you talk about vests, because I'm also going to talk about vests. Here we are talking about, like, let's broaden our horizons in the knitting world. I'm also making a Petite Knit vest.
Look, she picked it out, not me.
Okay, well, I picked this out. And I'm excited about it. So I have knit a few vests. I knit a baby vest. I knit a pullover vest for my brother, a male body. The like male version of the pattern is still a little bit tight. But I don't have a vest myself, and I don't know when I will be able to wear a real sweater. So I'm just excited to like have a vest, because I don't have any vests.
I have one vest. I have the Schemer pullover.
That you made yourself.
Yeah, Kelborn Woolen's Lucky Tweed. And I did that because I looked around in Colorado and saw everyone has those like quilted vests, you know, those Patagonia vests.
Yes,
which I don't particularly like the look of, and was like, oh my, this would be so much cuter if it was a wool vest. So that
It's a pullover,
that inspired
not
me.
a zip, no zip, no
Zip. You just pull it over and it doesn't attach to the
So
front.
So I'm doing the Esther vest, which is a button up. Wait, there was a reason I was bringing this up in particular.
Okay.
Just excited about vests.
Yeah. Just excited about vests. Just two women excited about vests. Yelling about vests.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not only about knitting. We do other things in our life. So what?
Sometimes.
So we are also two women yelling about things other than knitting. And what is something other than knitting that you want to yell about, Allison?
Again, I feel like I've cheated on this multiple times where I've been like, it's technically not knitting, it is crochet. Today, it's technically not knitting, it's sewing, which I don't have much experience with. I guess you can kind of see our setup today is such that my daughter's like sewing stuff is in that corner. I usually block it out, but we changed the setup so we could both be here. So my 9-year-old is super into sewing, and I've like wanted to get into it. And we have a sewing machine, but I still felt very stuck on even the basics. And there's this great, again, I live in suburban Washington, D.C. It's kind of niche, but it is called Creative Youth. And it is a sewing studio mostly for children, but it's not even like a creative art studio. Like it literally teaches sewing. Like,
so
and they
cool.
have multiple classes a week that are full and like hard to get into because there are that many kids who want to do it. And they recently added an adult class that works with my work schedule. And so I've been going to this sewing class, and it's like nice to be in this space where my like it really makes my daughter so happy. And it's like nice to be in
Where
a
is
space.
she there at the same time?
No.
Okay.
We did do a workshop together, which was just about like, here's how you literally just use a sewing machine for the parents. But this is just my own time, but it's cute. It's like the teacher and I mostly spend our time talking about my kid because like she's been going there for so long, and I'm excited to know how to, I almost said knit, to know how to sew myself some stuff, but also exciting to just like get to know a little bit more about what she's into and to feel like I could, like, she's at the point where it's like, I can't really help her. And it's like, well, maybe I'll catch up a little bit. So yeah, so I've been making myself a tote bag,
Fun.
which I'm almost done with.
What's like your goal? What do you want to make?
Well, so again, like when she got into sewing, I took her to a fabric store. And then of course I was like, I'm going to buy some fabric. And I bought the fabric and like elastic. It's sitting right there. Like everything I needed to do, and pattern, like real pattern, to do a skirt and a top. And it's been sitting there since I bought it. So
That's fine.
yeah. So, so that's my goal, I think, is
Yeah.
like to actually use those patterns and
Fun.
try to put it together.
Super
How about
fun.
you? What would you like to yell about other than knitting?
So I want to yell about the new bakery in my neighborhood. It's called Moon Raccoon Bakery. They have been at farmers markets, selling in farmers markets for a few years, I think. And so they just opened an actual brick and mortar bakery in Denver, and they use all Colorado milled grains, which of course, like my local food loving heart, farmer supporting heart really appreciates. But you can actually taste it like in the dough. They do a lot of like laminated dough, so like croissant type dough, and I could really taste it. Like gave it a lot of flavor besides just butter, which obviously butter is a delicious flavor. My kids both had the brownie croissant, which was basically like a chocolate croissant, but instead of just chocolate in the middle, it was more like a soft brownie batter.
Whoa.
So it was really good. And they just had all kinds of like interesting, delicious things. And they have a great sign on their door, which is very applicable to today's episode, which I will put on the screen. And they just seem great. And I'm excited to have them in the neighborhood.
Nice. Yeah. I just thought of laminated dough and butter. We did see today a dress made out of like butter labels because we went to the Smithsonian American Art Museum State Fair exhibit, which had lot of textiles, not necessarily as much knitting as I
Yeah,
was maybe
not a
hoping
lot of
for,
knitting.
but lots of craft adjacent things that we really loved. And we want to do we'll do a little mini episode about that.
Yeah.
But we had one day together. We used it so
We made the
wisely.
most of it.
Went to see a craft fair or craft exhibit, got some delicious food, figured out
2
technology,
hours on technology.
and recorded a podcast in person.
Yeah.
So thanks
And
for
Allison
watching.
showed me a little bit about spinning.
Oh yeah, and that will be another. Yeah, we'll put some of that B-roll in to
Somewhere.
this episode
Probably.
and apply it counterclockwise. So, see, it already fell apart a little bit, but that's okay. So, it's called your lead because it helps you get the yarn on. And then you're using both feet at the same time and kind of smoothing it out. And then the wheel kind of sucks it up. But it's pretty cool. It's very tactile. It's much less technical than knitting.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Bye.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.